The lawyer looked straight at me and said I got nothing. Just like that. No emotion, no hesitation, like I was a stranger. My heart didn't just drop, it shattered. Your grandfather left everything to your cousin, Chase Whitman. I could barely hear the rest. The room started spinning. They thought I'd cry. They thought I'd disappear quietly. But what they didn't know was this: the account. It was still under my name. And once I remembered that detail, I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I just froze every damn cent and watched their little plan collapse in silence. I wasn't raised by my parents. They were too busy chasing second chances, rebuilding their broken marriage after I was already born. I was the reminder of a mistake, an unwanted chapter in their story. So they left me with Grandpa, Walter Blake. He wasn't just my grandfather. He was my home. He raised me in a small craftsman house on Evergreen Avenue in Salem, Oregon. Wooden floors that creaked, a porch swing that sang with the wind, and the scent of his pipe tobacco clinging to every curtain. He made me oatmeal every morning. He taught me how to plant tomatoes. He called me little firecracker every time I stood up for myself. When kids at school laughed at my hand-me-downs, he told me, "They laugh now, but one day they'll wish they had your fire." That fire burned quietly in me for years, and it kept me warm even when the world tried to freeze me out. When Grandpa got sick, I moved back in with him, quit my job, dropped everything. I didn't even think twice. Hospice came, then the oxygen tank, then the silence. You think you're ready for it, but you never are. When he died, something inside me collapsed, not loudly, just a quiet crumbling, like when an old bookshelf gives out underweight it's carried for too long. The funeral was quick, cold, rushed. My Aunt Karen barely looked at me. Her son, Chase, didn't even say hello. They walked around like they already owned the place. That's when the whispers started. Little hints, quick glances. Karen was arranging things, selling items, preparing papers. She said, "It's what your grandfather wanted." I asked about the will. She smiled like I was a toddler asking why the sky is blue. "Oh, honey," she said, "you don't need to worry about that." And just like that, I was erased. I called the lawyer myself, set an appointment, drove there alone. It was a gray morning. My hands were shaking, but I still believed somewhere deep down I'd see my name. Because Grandpa loved me, because I was there, because I was his. But when the lawyer opened the folder, his tone shifted. Professional, flat. Walter Blake has left his estate, including his house and accounts, to Chase Whitman. I blinked. That's it, no mention of me. I asked, "Is there another version, another file?" He adjusted his glasses. "This is the only legal version currently on record." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, hollowed out. I thanked him, stood up, walked outside. The wind cut across my face like a blade. It wasn't just about the house, or the money. It was about being invisible to the man who raised me. It was about the world pretending I never existed. But then something stirred. A memory. I was 19. I'd just gotten my first job. Grandpa had taken me to the bank. He'd opened an account in both our names. Just in case something happens to me, he said, "I want you to have something that no one can touch." I had forgotten about it, but now I couldn't forget. So I drove straight to his old house. Karen hadn't changed the locks yet. I went through drawers, cabinets, old files, and then I found it. A faded manila folder, inside a copy of the bank document. His name, my name, joint account, signed, sealed, dated. And that's when everything inside me shifted. Grief turned to fuel. Silence turned to strategy. I wasn't just the forgotten girl anymore. I was the co-owner of everything they thought they stole. There's a kind of quiet rage that doesn't scream. It doesn't punch walls or break dishes. It doesn't need to. It waits and it calculates. That's what I felt as I held that manila folder in my lap. The paper inside was old, a little yellowed. But the ink was clear. Walter Blake and Nora Blake joint account holders. It wasn't just a signature. It was proof that I mattered. Proof that Grandpa knew what they would try to do, and that he had protected me in the one way that couldn't be undone by whispers, lawyers, or family lies. I sat on that porch, the same one he used to read the Sunday paper on, and I didn't cry. Instead, I made a call. Bank of Oregon, downtown Salem branch. The woman on the phone asked for verification. I gave her everything: name, date of birth, last deposit I could remember. She put me on hold. The music was light jazz, the kind Grandpa hated. He used to joke that jazz sounded like a band warming up and never playing. When the rep returned, she sounded more formal. Yes, Ms. Blake. We do show a joint account under those names. May I ask the nature of your call? I took a breath, let it fill the hollow space in my chest, and said slowly, I need to place a freeze on that account. There's a potential legal dispute. There was a pause on the other end. I could feel her weighing the request. But then she spoke, understood. With your authority as co-owner, we can initiate a temporary freeze pending legal clarification. And just like that, it began. By the next morning, I had the official paperwork in hand. I drove to the branch personally. I wanted them to see my face, to know I wasn't just a name on a line. I walked in wearing Grandpa's old flannel shirt, the one he wore every fall, the one that still smelled faintly like tobacco and cedar. The manager greeted me politely, offered me coffee. I declined. I didn't come for comfort. He reviewed the documents, nodded slowly, and then he signed. One blue pen stroke, and suddenly, Chase Whitman's world was on pause. I imagined him sitting in some leather chair, bragging about his new inheritance. Maybe already spending the money in his mind, maybe even in real life. But when he'd try to access it, error. Blocked. Frozen. I didn't need revenge to be loud. I needed it to be undeniable. By the third day, I got the call. Unknown number. I picked up. His voice came sharp, like shattered glass. What the hell did you do? Nora. I didn't flinch. I protected what was mine. That money is mine, he snapped. The will says, the account says otherwise. I interrupted. Silence. Then a threat disguised as a sneer. You don't have the stomach for this. You were always the charity case. Ah, there it was. The real voice behind the fake smiles. I said nothing, because silence cuts deeper than any scream. Later that week, I received a formal notice from his lawyer. A request to unfreeze the account based on primary inheritance rights. I sent back my own response, signed by my attorney. Joint tenancy overrides testamentary intent unless properly revoked. Translation: if your name's not on the account, tough luck. Karen tried to call me too, left a voicemail dripping in sweetness and desperation. Sweetheart, this is all just a misunderstanding. Let's talk like family. Family funny. I don't remember family locking me out of the funeral plans. I don't remember family hiding the will until after everything was transferred. No, this wasn't family. This was war dressed in pearls and perfume. I stayed quiet publicly. No Facebook posts. No text chains. I let the papers and the silence do the talking. I reviewed every document from Grandpa's old files. Found insurance policies. Old letters. A handwritten note that simply said, if anything ever happens, Nora knows where the truth is. I held that note like a lifeline, because in the end, it wasn't about winning. It was about not being erased. And I was done being invisible. One morning, Chase's lawyer proposed a settlement. I declined, not because I wanted it all, but because they wanted me to beg. Instead, I filed a formal petition to make my name the sole owner of the account based on survivorship rights. It would take time, maybe months, but I had patience, because every day that account remained frozen was a reminder to them that I was still here, and I was not to be dismissed. There's something intoxicating about silence. Not the absence of sound, but the kind of silence that comes with power, where every move is calculated, every word is a choice. That was the space I lived in now. While Chase paced around, calling lawyers, trying to unlock the money he thought was already his. I was 10 steps ahead. I started gathering more than just documents. I started gathering leverage. Grandpa's house, the one they tried to edge me out of, was still in probate. Karen had filed paperwork to have Chase named executor, but probate isn't automatic, especially when someone contests it. So I did. Filed my own claim, submitted care records, photographs, journals, even nurse statements from the last months of Grandpa's life. They all said the same thing: I was his sole caregiver. I lived with him. I was there when no one else was. Karen and Chase never even visited, not once. I found receipts, grocery lists, prescriptions, heating bills, all with my name on them. I wasn't just a granddaughter. I was the one who kept his world running when it was falling apart. My attorney helped file a petition to delay probate based on undue influence and suspicious timing, because something didn't add up. The will they submitted, it was dated just 2 months before Grandpa died, but his handwriting, it wasn't right, too clean, too steady, and by then, he could barely hold a pen. I didn't accuse them of forgery, not yet, but I made sure the court had enough questions to slow everything down. Meanwhile, I started revisiting my memories. The quiet ones, the moments no one else knew about, like the day Grandpa told me about the safe deposit box. "Everything that matters is inside it," he whispered. "If something ever goes wrong, open it." Back then, I didn't ask what he meant. Now, I understood. I went to the bank, presented the key, verified my ID. They led me to a cold, dim room in the back. The box slid out with a heavy metal sound. Inside, I found letters, photographs, a flash drive, and another document, a handwritten letter addressed to me. "Nora, if you're reading this, it means something happened. And I'm sorry. I always meant to update the will, but I trusted the account would be enough to protect you. If Karen and Chase went too far, this drive has everything you need. Do what you must, but do it quietly, with dignity, like I raised you to." My hands were shaking, but my resolve stronger than ever. I went home and opened the flash drive. It contained recordings, conversations between Grandpa and Karen, her pushing him to sign forms, him resisting, confused. And finally, a recording where she says, "Just trust me. Dad, Chase will take care of everything." It was damning, not criminal yet, but enough to make any court hesitate. I had the upper hand, but I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted them to feel what I felt: the betrayal, the dismissal, the cold slap of being replaced. So I waited, and the longer I waited, the more desperate they became. Chase's tone changed, first angry, then mocking, then pleading. Karen even showed up at my door one afternoon, in a beige coat, pearls, crocodile tears. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. I opened the door just enough to say, "You made your choices. Now live with them." Then I closed it again. It was cruel, but it was just, they thought I would fade. They thought I would give up, but I didn't. Because Grandpa taught me that quiet strength lasts longer than noise. That still water cuts the deepest. I was no longer the forgotten girl in the background. I was the storm they didn't see coming. Some people fight with fists, some with words. Me, I fought with paper, with silence, with strategy. It had been 4 weeks since the account was frozen. 4 weeks of Chase scrambling, Karen whispering, lawyers circling like sharks. And me, I was still, watching. The court had granted my petition to delay the probate hearing. They flagged the will for handwriting verification. They agreed that the timeline was suspicious. Suddenly, Karen's calm unraveled. She hired a new lawyer, filed a motion to dismiss my claim, and in doing so, she opened a door I was waiting for. Discovery, her emails, her notes, her calls with Chase, everything subpoenaed. They had tried to fast-track Grandpa's estate, tried to liquidate accounts before probate even began, which was illegal. And now I had it in writing. My lawyer smiled as we reviewed the documents. "You don't need to destroy them, Nora. They're already sinking." But I wasn't done. Because money was one thing, legacy was another. So I went to the local paper, told them nothing personal, just facts. the story of a granddaughter fighting to protect her grandfather's wishes. They ran a small column in the community section, caregiver contests, suspicious will in Blake estate dispute. Names weren't mentioned, but everyone in Salem knew who we were. The Whitman name wasn't as untouchable as they thought. The next day, Karen called again. This time, her voice was thinner, less pearls, more panic. Let's find a solution. Nora, for everyone's sake. I agreed to a mediation meeting, but I walked in holding two things: the joint account document and a printed transcript of her bank email, time-stamped, asking Chase, "Has she found the account yet?" She paled. Her lawyer stammered, and I just looked at them. "I'm not here to negotiate," I said calmly. "I'm here to offer an exit." Chase slammed his fist on the table. "You think you're better than us? You were nothing until he took pity on you." I stared at him, long and hard. He didn't take pity. He gave me what you'll never have: respect. I stood up, slid the evidence across the table. "You can fight me. You can drag this through court. But if you do, I will not stop. And everything you've buried, every forged file, every lie will come to light." They blinked first. 3 days later, I received a new proposal. They would relinquish all claims to the account. They would withdraw Chase's request for executor. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue charges. It wasn't a win, it was a surrender. I signed, but I added a clause A, formal written acknowledgement, that I had cared for Walter Blake until his final day, that his legacy, his values lived on in me. It wasn't for them. It was for the record, for history, for every version of me that once believed I was invisible. Weeks later, I stood alone on the porch. Autumn had rolled in, orange and gold dancing in the trees. The swing creaked gently behind me. I had the account, the house, the quiet, but more than that, I had peace. People asked me if I felt vindicated, if I wanted to celebrate, but that was never the point. The point was to defend the truth, to prove that love isn't always loud, that the people who show up in silence still matter, that I mattered. I placed Grandpa's flannel shirt on the back of the swing, sat down, and whispered, "I did it. Grandpa, they didn't erase me. Not this time. The thing about revenge, real revenge, it doesn't explode. It seeps, slow, silent, undeniable." After the agreement was signed, I walked out of that mediation room and never looked back. I didn't need to. The account was legally mine. The probate case was closed. The house title transferred in my name. No more threats, no more letters, no more ghosted calls in the middle of the night. But the most satisfying part, they had to watch me win, without ever raising my voice. I could have sold the house, could have cashed everything out and left Salem behind, but I didn't. Because this wasn't just about property, it was about place, memory, blood. So I stayed. I fixed up the porch first, painted it soft gray, like the sweater Grandpa wore every winter. I brought back the porch swing, added fresh cushions, hung his favorite wind chimes by the front window. Neighbors started stopping by. They'd bring over tomatoes, fresh pie, sometimes just a smile. They told me stories I'd never heard, about how Grandpa helped build their fences, loaned tools, offered advice when roofs caved or marriages cracked. He wasn't just my world, he was a part of theirs too. I started planting again, tomatoes, basil, lavender, just like he taught me. Some mornings, I'd sit in that garden with a mug of coffee and feel him in the sunlight. Not in the wind or the sky, but in the soil, in the roots, in the quiet. One day, I received a letter. No return address, just a simple white envelope. Inside was a check, and a note, scrawled hastily in Chase's handwriting. "For what it's worth, you earned it." I didn't cash it, didn't tear it up either. I tucked it away, because sometimes proof doesn't need to be spent. Sometimes the point is that they had to admit it. Karen faded from town life, moved to Seattle. I heard, no more social luncheons, no more smug glances in the church pews. Reputation is a fragile thing, and she cracked hers all on her own. But me, I built something, not just a home, a sanctuary, a place where no one could tell me I didn't belong. I started writing again, journaling, just like I did as a teen. Only now, the words didn't ache, they bloomed. One entry read, "They gave my inheritance to my cousin," but they didn't realize the account was still in my name. And when the moment came, I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I simply froze everything they thought they'd stolen and took it all back with one piece of paper. It wasn't dramatic, but it was devastating. Power doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. And when it does, you learn to listen. Months passed. I framed Grandpa's old license plate, hung it by the kitchen door. It reminded me that legacy isn't always about money. Sometimes it's about knowing who stood by you when no one else did. One evening, I sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea, looking out at the rain, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Karen. Not at Chase. They taught me something I never expected. That being underestimated is a weapon. A gift. Because when they thought I was nothing, I had the freedom to become anything. And I became the storm.